Good afternoon, Maine, and welcome to the the Muddy Waters podcast. Today it is Friday. It is Good Friday, so happy early Easter, happy Good Friday to people as we head into this holiday weekend. And we are doing this unusual Friday podcast. So it may be a little while since you've seen me on. We've had some things going on, but in the works. I posted one that hasn't aired to X or any other places yet, but is on the main anchor. So if you want to see the actual most recent prior to this podcast episode, it's actually on the mainanchor.com with Major Michael Gary. That would be episode 58. This is episode 59. We are the Muddy Waters podcast. Again, I'm Chuck Ellis. I'm your host. And the Muddy Waters podcast, as you know, if you've been paying attention, exists because the people of Maine are not appropriately informed about what's going on in our state, how to get involved, how to help change your world. Our mainstream media, which in my opinion should exist to inform the people of Maine about the things that are going on, but instead have become, a propaganda arm of the left. And so we're trying to fight back in this information war. The Maine Wire and some other people, Inquirer, and Truth Slinger and some other people are doing some things to try and help us win the information war. But we need more information out there. And one of the things that we all saw in the 2024 election cycle, even though Joe Rogan was not a political man prior to COVID, the impact of podcasts and the long form where people have longer conversations gives people a better opportunity to understand what's actually going on, hear people's stories. And so that's why we created this podcast, is to give you the opportunity to meet some people from around the state, whether that be legislators, people involved in politics, or just moms, business owners, health practitioners, and more, pastors even we've had on. And so today we have with us one of my fellow aspiring politicians is what I call myself, who also ran for House 2 terms. I think that I was also running. And so I'll just bring her in. So thank you for joining us, Heather Sprague.
Hey, how you doing, Chuck?
I'm doing good. And you?
Good. Doing real good. Thank you for having me on, and happy Good Friday.
Yeah, thanks for taking making the time. I know. Well, got to get Impeach Mills into the right location. I think your camera. There's a way to reverse that, but it looks like it's.
Right, everything's backwards.
Yeah,
I'll get my shit together one of these days.
Well, that's one thing. I think somebody, when I should have helped you before we went live. But either way, thank you for taking the time to come on and tell people a little bit. We'll get into a little bit about like who you are, where you come from, what got you involved, but some additional things in addition to having run for office twice. That you're like me. You are now the chair of a county for the Republican Party, Knox County, right?
Yep, in the Mid Coast. Nice.
And what's your day job?
I pick crab meat actually down in Port Clyde, America.
Oh, nice. Port Clyde. Really good friend of mine grew up in Port Clyde. Yep. So great place, great people, great Maine industry, obviously. So something that's really important to our economy. So cool. Well, Heather, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about like who you are, where you come from, why in the world you would want to be involved in politics during this, like, what do you want to call it? Crazy time, I guess, is the short thing, where, we're almost as divided. I think ideologically we're further divided than the Civil War, but we're not yet killing each other for the most part. But like at such a tumultuous time to be involved in Maine politics. And even we saw a video of you going and asking questions at the Shelley Pingree event, and being willing to stand up publicly and ask questions, challenging questions of our supposed representative in Washington. So why in the world, how did you come to a place where you were like, well, I'll do politics?
Well, in 2020, when Janet shut the state down, I didn't like that, and I saw bad things coming for us down the pike, and I started going to Augusta and attending the Open Maine rallies, and we had them every week. And then I saw an opportunity to get involved, and so I joined my local GOP, and then I joined Maine Stands Up, and I just basically joined every group that I could possibly join. I cannot stand injustice. I can't stand censorship. I can't stand tyranny. I am a diehard patriot. I am a bicentennial baby. I'd like to think that that has something to do with it. um, I've always loved history. I've been into the Revolutionary War since I was a child. Growing up in Thomaston, Maine, it's home of Henry Knox, General Henry Knox. Um, I just saw an opening to be able to serve my country and the people. I love to help people. I hate seeing people struggle, um, and so the door opened up for me there, and it just went from there. I can't remember. I think it might have been either that year. Yeah, in 2020, 28 seats went uncontested by Republicans. This is
Wow.
how we got one party rule. Nobody stood up. So I said, I'm going to stand up. So that's how I
Yep.
ran the first time in 22 for the House seat. I lost then, and then my motto is never surrender. So of course I
Yep.
ran again last year, and I'm possibly going to run again. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've been a part of my local GOP for the last 5 years, and the chair position opened up, and I ran for it, and was nobody ran against me, so I got that. I've also been a state committee woman for Knox for the last 2 cycles, and I was a delegate at large to the RNC convention in Milwaukee last year, which was amazing. I've never done anything like that. Um, and I
Yeah.
had to run a campaign for that too at the main GOP convention for 2 days.
Okay.
And I did that. I passed out my flyers and was voted in for that, and went out and voted for Trump. Had a wicked good time, and I like it. I'm not afraid to stand up and speak. I'm not afraid of doing that. Our voice is important. We're the forgotten Mainers, and
Mm.
where I live is a huge fishing community, and it's. I used to dig clams as well, and that's pretty much died off because it's regulated to death. Um, the fishing industry is regulated to death. Um,
Yep.
And then we have the big drug problem. I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic, and I really want to help my fellow, Mainers get up out of that ditch and get better, and show them that if I can do it, they can do it. Uh, I say it a lot on social media. My neighbors lost both of their sons a year apart to fentanyl overdoses, and
Wow.
that's too close to home for me.
Yeah.
Um, and it's I heard that we had, and I'm sure it's probably higher now, because every day we're losing somebody, but the media won't report it. We've had 129 overdoses this year alone
Yeah.
in May. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
where I am.
Yeah, so you just saw something bad going on and said, "I can stand up and I can help." As simple as that. I think for a lot of people, I think it sounds like you don't have a problem standing up and speaking your mind, and you know, is that something you always had, or is that something like post recovery that's just been easier for you? Because I just wonder, like, because like not a lot of people are like, "I'll stand up and be the bad guy."
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's something I've always had. I grew up on Route 1 in Thomaston, and I don't know if you've ever driven through Thomaston by Montpelier. There's a stretch
Probably.
of road right there at the light where it's pretty dangerous. And there's this little tiny sidewalk that they never keep up. And even back then, when I was old enough to go uptown, I went straight to the town office, could barely see over the counter, and complained about that sidewalk. And to this day, they still haven't fixed that damn sidewalk. So it
Wow.
was in me. It's always been in me.
Yeah.
In school, I used to stick up for the kids that were being bullied, and I'm a short woman, and I've never let that stop me. My mother, my father was abusive. He was a Vietnam veteran. My mother was a small woman. And I get a lot of that from that. I didn't want to be that woman, and
Mm.
that made me strong and brave, and not silent. I'm not gonna let anybody treat me like that. I don't care who they are. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of us were awakened in one form or fashion. Like I'll say that I was paying attention to politics, but I definitely didn't think we were in danger of having what happened over the course of the last 5 years happen. Right.
Right.
So going. I mean, I knew that there was like I've been concerned about the march of the liberal agenda for a long period of time. But again, the
Yeah.
the idea there's a lot of these things that it's like I wouldn't have ever believed that so many people could get on board with. I mean, we talk about some of the big issues that are going on in Maine, and Maine is known now. Unfortunately, I say it'd be great for Maine to be known for like what it historically was known for, which is the ocean and
Yeah.
lobsters, not men competing in women's sports. But that's kind of the big issue today. And what's really interesting about that issue is that. Yeah, it's obviously, we say nationally, right? It's an 80-20 issue, right? Trump claims it's a 90-10, and he's like, he doesn't know who the 10 are, but you should visit Southern Maine. I can
Yeah.
point them out. They're all here. But like, it's,
Oh, I mean,
so
there's
polls have,
600 of them in the auditorium in Camden Hills the other night at that town hall, and I was the only Republican there.
yeah. Yeah, there were a few of us. I think we had like a contingent of like 5 or 6 people that were
That was
there, but we
packed,
still,
wasn't it? Huh?
it was pretty packed. Yeah, the upper seats weren't as filled, but there were quite a few people there. Yeah, and it was really interesting being in that environment. I actually wrote a little blog about it today because it was just like it was crazy. But one of the positives was I met a woman who we had good dialogue with. She's told me she votes 90% Democrat, but it's interesting. She said she wouldn't call herself a Democrat, right? So that's
Hmm.
rare for I think the Democrat Party, because I think most people, a lot of the people who would go to the events like that are so diehard that
Yeah.
they bleed Democrat blue,
Yeah.
and she was like a little bit more, open, and we had good dialogue, which, again, is something I really wasn't expecting. We found some common ground, which, by the way, I've talked about that a lot on the podcast. If you guys are paying attention, it is possible. And if we go to places like that, stand up, we actually had a number of people come up to us and talk to us afterwards and want to know, like, and again, her point was like, I really don't understand why you guys have voted the way that you do, and I wasn't intending to stick out. I'd got this brand new hat, but it was a red hat in
Red
a blue
hat.
place, and I think everybody assumed it was a Trump hat, even though it's a Muddy
Mhm.
Waters hat. These are for
Yeah.
sale. If you go to my my X account, there's a link to my Printify where you can buy a hat. We've actually got shirts as well. These
Oh,
Muddy Waters t-shirts and
I
things like
like it.
that, so you can have fun talking about the podcast, talking about how gross and disgusting the muddy waters of Maine politics are. And
Yeah.
there's a place where you can learn more about it. But yeah, but like we talk a lot about like how we win, how we fix our state, how we fix our country is by having civil discourse. Like the
Yeah.
reality is, as much as like, in the Republican circles, I get myself in trouble because though I'm in favor, for the record, of Trump's agenda. I think he's on policy. I really love Trump. I don't agree with like things like, and I'm told not to talk about it, but I don't care. This idea of this mandate that he won from the American people. I'm like, he didn't actually even get 50% of the popular vote. He did win the Electoral College, but every one of those swing states, it was by about this much. So if you look at the total number of electorates, yeah, it looks like big victory. But if you look at the percentages that he won by in those like 8 swing states or 7 swing states, it really wasn't that much. And so we're at this place where our country is incredibly divided. Is some of that cheating and things like that? Sure. But there's still so many people that are just ideologically bought into either the Democrat agenda, which is crazy,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like the things that they're pushing, the major issues, the reasons that big part of the reasons that Trump won, um, you know, you know, or they're just so afraid of Trump,
Yeah.
and they think he's this evil dictator who's going to destroy our world, our economy. He's going to kill people. He's going to, as one of the girls at the event the other night claimed, she's a U.S. citizen, but she's from Chinese descent. And she's worried that if she goes back to visit family in China, that she won't be able to come back to the U.S. because he'll change the laws and she'll lose her citizenship. And it's like, are
It's
you like,
where are they getting
like
that from? Like,
it's
it's funny
the
because last 4 years, Biden did everything that you just said. Biden totaled our economy. He changed laws. I mean, they were getting ready to throw all the MAGA people in re-education camps. That's
There
that's
were conversations about it, and they were having literal legitimate conversations about limiting free speech.
yeah, they're
Like
still
they're like,
doing
free speech is good, but it's a little too free. We got to make it a little less. As soon as free speech is not completely free, it's not free at all.
right. This is
Yeah,
America. I mean, they're
yeah,
trying to change it into a socialist Venezuela. We
yeah.
can't let that happen. And
No,
obviously, Maine's turned into the state where that shit's gone to die because it's all here.
yeah,
We've got Washington State. I don't know if you heard this yet or not, but the governor in Washington State's getting ready to sign a bill that says that if a in a medical emergency or any kind of emergency like another pandemic, the government would have say over your health care.
yeah. Go
They would
home.
tell
No
you
way.
who you shot. Oh yeah, and I,
No.
and I, I see that coming down the pike here.
Oh yeah,
You know,
and like I think I saw something yesterday. I think it was Laurel Libby had posted something about, how they're like in as opposed to recognizing the reality of how they lost international, like nationally, and saying, hey, maybe we should back off a little bit of the crazy, right? Instead of that, they have decided to double down.
yeah.
Obviously, we see this as they continue to censure Laurel Libby and all this other kind. But yesterday there's a bill and it's not going to pass because it needs 2/3 in order to be a constitutional amendment, but they're trying to pass a constitutional amendment that would enshrine uh, transgender women, quote unquote, boys pretending to be women, as being able to compete in women's sports, instead of passing a bill that actually makes sense, which would ban transgender women, biological men from women's sports. They're tripling down, I guess is the way, or quadruple. I don't even know at this point. It just keeps going and going and going. And it's wild. It's wild to me that they're either they just have this belief that there's no way that they're ever going to lose, that they have such a vice grip on power here in the state of Maine that we actually have no hope, and so they're just going to do what they want to do.
Mm.
Or they're just out of, I can't really think of another, like another, or they're just like they don't care. I don't even understand. It hurts my head. Or they're just like, again, so themselves ideologically captured that they think this is what needs to happen, that they will do it even if it means that they lose, and they'll consider themselves to be some martyr for the cause, for
Well,
doing so.
they're going to cheat no matter what they're doing because this is a third session in Maine where they're running the session. They do the sign and die, and then they bring
Yeah,
it back under a false emergency.
right.
Now, when you're under an emergency, there's no limit on spending because God forbid you need to buy tanks or whatever. You know what I mean? Just you never know
Yeah,
what the emergency would be, but so they have no limit on spending, and they can ram all these friggin' bills through, like late term of the LD 1619. All of that was rammed through down our throats under a false emergency that is
yeah,
unconstitutional. And all of these damn bills that they're ramming through that they're making law should be null and void. I don't know
yeah.
how to go about that, but and
Well,
no,
the pro.
what
Good.
she's doing.
What?
But you know what? If the Democrats were really all about the law like they claim to be, they should be impeaching Mills for what she's doing. She's sacrificing federal funding in order to continue to discriminate against the women and young girls of Maine. Wow. You know, I was a Trump supporter before because I loved what he did 4 years ago, but I really am now because he's the only one standing up for women. I'm women. I'm a woman. I got a daughter. And hello, we're second class citizens now to Mills and the Democrats, and that's not fair. So as long
Yep.
as he is standing up for women, I'm going to keep, championing for him. I've gone
Yeah.
to bat before. I was at the hearing to keep him off the ballot with my Maine for Trump hat. Made
Wow.
Shannon Bellows look at that the whole time.
Like it's so wild how Democrats believe themselves to be so pro women. Like they really do. They think they're And I even still, because like on a lot of my social media accounts, I've posted a bunch of stuff from like the Girl First event, and then from the original rally on March 1st at the Capitol. I think it was the March Against Mills, I think is what we might have called it, but it
Yeah.
was it was also about protecting women's sports. So it was anti-mills, pro women. And just I went around asking people, and I took these videos, and I'm like, why are you here? And then I would be like, isn't it kind of strange that the party of women's rights doesn't care about women in this area and really seems to only care about one quote unquote right, which is the
Mm.
ability to take away a life that's growing inside of them. It's a little wild to me that they don't recognize that, okay, we don't actually care about any other rights of women, but we care about this one, is what it looks like from where I sit, because I
If
mean,
this doesn't prove that
protecting
everything
women's
they
sports
say
and
they're for
spaces.
is false, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is obvious right now that they're not for women, they're not for life, they're not for free speech, they're not for anybody's rights but their own. I mean, look at them now. They think they can kill people just because they disagree with them. Look at the Luigi Mangione that they're
Yeah.
sticking up for. Look at the guy they're trying to bring back from El Salvador. None of them Democrat reps went down to Virginia when all them people needed help. But you've got friggin' Van Holden going down to El Salvador having martinis with friggin' an MS-13 gang member. They're calling a Maryland dad. Hello.
Yeah, well, and again, you were at the rally, and I don't know what you experience hearing from other people, but like a lot of their people, they really a big part of the problem is that they just believe what these politicians and what the mainstream media is telling them. That's like I don't think, right, and this is why like a lot of times on the podcast I try to differentiate between Democrats
Yeah.
and Democrat voters, right?
Yes.
There's Democrat politicians and then Democrat voters. And there's a big difference because your voters, unfortunately, and we can judge them and we can be like, oh, they should do more research. And we can, and we're probably right. But at the same time, they got to a place, and again, this is another fault of theirs. Anytime we get to a place where we believe our politicians implicitly and we don't ask questions and we don't like, when I heard some of the things, at the rally, I was like, huh, I had not heard those facts, quote unquote. And so then I did my research, right? And I came to the conclusion, okay, oh, they're twisting facts. But people on our side, the Republican side also twists facts. And so we need to be people who are not just trusting as well. We just need to be people who are not just trusting our news sources and our people because they're our people, but being like, huh, are you sure about that? Like no matter which side it is. Like one of the biggest problems we have here in the United States of America is if you're a Republican, you trust everything the Republicans do, and you're very critical of everything the Democrats do. Vice versa, the Democrats are like very critical of the Republicans, but not just completely uncritical of their own party. We need to be critical of everybody
I'm
and
critical
really,
of everybody.
yeah, and really kind of dive in and be like, is this really true, or are you just like making this up because it's a good talking point, or twisting truth? And like one of the examples I like to use, I had this in the conversation with Anne, which was the woman that I met with after the rally, is like, Democrats will attack Trump for having a bad economy when he left office. It's like, well, that was due to COVID, and
Yeah.
right. On the flip side, Republicans will talk about how great the economy was before that, and then they'll also talk about how low the mortgage rates were and how cheap gas was. And it's like, okay, like both parties are using different aspects of the same situation to their own advantage, right? Mortgage rates were low because of COVID, right? They weren't low because of Trump. They were low because of COVID. COVID happened. The interest rates were slashed to zero to try and help boost the economy. Gas was low because nobody was traveling, and so you had these insane dips. So these are
Gas was $1.87 when Trump was in office before COVID. You could look it
not
up.
before. It was after COVID. It
It
was
was
after COVID began. It
2019.
was. I don't
I've
believe so.
argued with
Okay, well,
hey,
I've got an open mind, unlike some of the people on the other side. But like a lot of times they're citing the 2020 numbers, and maybe
yeah.
it was, but like the truth is, like, things were better economically under the Trump administration. I wholeheartedly agree, but sometimes we use manipulated data, such as where the mortgage rates were at when Trump left office, which is 3%. Which, by the way, as somebody who cares about people and their economic future, I don't ever want to see rates that low again, and that's not good long term for your society. We need to be a society that encourages people to save, not that encourages people to be in huge amounts of debt. And having really low interest rates encourages debt, and then
Hmm.
people are dependent, which is not good. Anyway, we need to encourage savers, but that's a whole separate issue. But the point is, like, on both sides of the aisle, we manipulate data to make it work for us, and we need to not be that. We need to be more critical of our own party. But again, part of the problem when I was at that rally, is what I'm going back to, is and you were at a similar one. All those people, they buy it. They buy all that stuff.
We're
Everything
talking
that
about
they're
the Pingree
spoon
rally.
fed. Yeah, the Pingree rally.
Yeah,
The people that are there, for the most part, they just buy it hook, line, and sinker, and they go beyond, right? They 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 believe that people who are here legally, who are doing nothing wrong, are being deported, right?
yeah.
It's just it's wild and hard to fathom how you could buy into such insanity. Such that
Well,
is obviously not true. And also, this is another point, and then I'll let you talk because I'm just but is that, like, there was no desire from Pingree or any of her people to be like, oh, no, 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 honey, you don't have to worry, you're a US citizen, nobody's going to take away your citizenship,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Instead, she's like, well, don't you, I'm gonna fight Trump on anything he tries to do that's wrong, but I'll support him if he does anything that I think is right. And it's like, okay, I don't buy the second part, and the first part, you don't need to fight for her. Trump is not in any way going to take away the citizenship of any US citizen, right? That's not going to happen. You will be tried in the courts if you break laws, but you're not going to get deported if you're a US citizen,
Yeah,
nor are you
no.
going to be not allowed back into the country unless you're, I guess, a terrorist. Maybe we might not, but like, anyway, it's like, yeah, so, but yeah, I don't know what your experience was like being there outside of
Oh,
just how crazy.
so before that, it was maybe the week before that, the local Democrat representatives had a town hall in Rockland
Yeah.
at the Universal Church, which shouldn't be called a church. There's no cross, no Jesus inside it, but that's my opinion. Uh, they held they held that there, and they don't announce that for everybody to come. They call it a town hall, which means the town can come, but it's only advertised through their Democrat channels because no
Yeah,
Republicans ever know about these things. That's
yeah,
how they're really organized, and that's how. So
yeah.
somebody sent me that, and I went, and my representative Ian Matlack and my former opponent was there, and I've seen a lot where hospitals are closing down and that they're getting rid of the maternity wards, and I sat there with my hand in the air for 15 minutes because they were not going to call on me. They don't expect Republicans to come. They spend the whole time bashing Republicans and lying because they don't think a Republican is going to be in the room. So I asked the question, why are the hospitals shutting down, and is Penn Bay, the hospital that's closest to me, going to be next? And Ann Matlack answered, You're right, because no more babies are being born." Okay, that's crazy. So I just wanted to get that in there. But then when I went to the Pingree Town Hall, which was also only advertised on the Knox County Times website, somebody sent that to me as well, and that's how I found out about it. Um, and before I got a chance to ask that question, they sat and they bashed and bashed and bashed Republicans. They said that, ICE is going to take all of the citizens and deport them. They're taking, and at the first town hall in Rockland, Ann Matlack and Valley Geiger and Vicky Dudera were all saying that they're going up on um, Native American reservations in Maine and plucking natives off the streets, the kids, and they're deporting them. And they're going to take your Social Security and main care. And it's all fear mongering. And I'll tell you, most of their base are elderly Mainers. They're scaring
Yeah.
the shit out of these people. And
Well,
that's
that's
what they're willing to kill, because they
Yeah.
think that it's literally their money's going to be taken from them, or they're going to be deported, and it's all lies. And I think it's very reckless and irresponsible that our sitting representatives are allowed to say this stuff, because it's causing chaos and division, and it's actually becoming dangerous. I mean, the school shooting in FSU yesterday, the guy was the sheriff's son. Not only was he that, he was seen there protesting with the pro-Palestinian mob.
Yeah.
It all goes hand in hand. Now,
Yeah.
I'm a big. I will call out whoever it is. I don't care what side it's on. If you're doing wrong, I'm gonna call you out. If it's a Republican, I'm gonna call you out. 9 times out of 10, though, who has been doing the wrong here? It's been Democrat representatives. There are bad Republicans in the Congress. There's a uniparty. I'm not happy
Yep.
with them. There are
You
Republicans
don't
who
like you don't like Lindsey Graham? He's not your favorite?
who?
Lindsey Graham? Mitch
No,
McConnell? You don't love
nope,
them?
nope.
Why not?
Nope, because they're rhinos. They look out for their best interests, not us. You know what I
They're
mean?
cogs. They're cogs in the machine. They're focused on the military-industrial complex, pharmaceutical-industrial complex, whatever
That's right.
lines their pockets, keeps them in office, whatever else they're looking for. Yeah. But yeah, so
You
there are
know,
problems on our side. But like most of the time at this point, like the things that are really negatively impacting your everyday Mainers, and in particular here in the state of Maine, because the Democrats control the houses of Congress here, and the governorship, and all the offices, officers, I should say, of the state, from
all the
Supreme
school
Court to
boards.
AG to, they have a significant control of the school boards. And what's fascinating about that, I just like to highlight this, because Maine, there a lot of people are struggling in Maine. More and more people are struggling. And even the Democrats will recognize this. Their solutions are different, even though like some people are trying to say that they think our economy is doing well, which was something that I was like, huh, excuse me, are you here in Maine? Are you what? I don't understand how you come to that conclusion. It's really, and it was more anecdotal. It was like they were citing, there were this people that they knew that ran a small business and it was doing really well, and they thought other businesses like them were doing well. And it's like, okay, but most businesses in Maine, most small businesses are struggling. They're closing up shop and or reducing things. Anyway, we're struggling, and like this is partially evidenced by the fact that like the housing crisis, and young people never being able to afford a home, and that's something where Democrats agree with us. The difference is they use these neat little words, affordable housing, and what they mean by affordable housing is you can rent from the government for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
not long-term good for people.
No, it's not, and
Somebody,
that's not the American way either. It's not. It's a socialist. It's a socialist way. That's what they're doing in Rockland. That's what they're doing in all over Midcoast, Maine. You go further inland, and property and houses are cheaper because it's away from the coast. Taxes are lower, all that stuff. But you're further away from everything up there, and I
it's
mean,
great. It's great up that way. I used to live in the Farmington area. Whew, it's great.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. It should be that way for everybody.
Beautiful.
You know what I mean? We're being taxed to death down here because, oh my God, we can see the water. What?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just
but
really
even like
bad.
the real, there's the taxes, but there's also real estate prices. So I bought a house in 2012. Obviously, that's kind of the housing prices hadn't recovered from 2008, 2009, all that kind of stuff. But I bought a house up there for like $62,000. This last year I sold it for about 200.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
like, it's just like even up that way. And it's like, it's not a bad house. Don't get me wrong. Like I didn't cheat anybody. That gave a good deal for the current market.
Right.
But it's, that's just what's happened with housing prices, that it's a simple home. It's a, 1,100 square feet, and it's still sold for that much money, which just is mind boggling. And, not cheap, especially with the current interest rates, but still not advocating for significantly lower rates. I would like lower rates, but just not the 3% range.
Right. I mean, the kids, it's so bad. I mean, it's all my kids are 20 somethings, and
Yeah.
they can't afford a house. They can barely afford to pay rent in a freaking apartment. And we're going to get to the point where they're not going to be able to get houses, period. I heard people
Yeah.
talking about it today in the store. The next
Yep.
generation of Mainers are not going to be able to afford a home.
Yeah. If we don't make
Acceptable.
some serious changes, what do you think? So obviously that's the issue. What's the answer? How do we get there?
We've got to
How do
lower,
we
like you said, our economy is so inflated here that we've got to get that down somehow. We've just got to we've got to make it so things are more affordable. I'm not an economist or a,
Sure. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, college degree or anything like that, But I mean, things are just so expensive. It's really not funny, and I think that mismanagement has had a lot to do with that, And
Yeah.
we pay a lot of taxes, and they've been stealing that money, and we've been giving it all to the illegal aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, did you hear the story about just one to house one was like out of the ballpark, thousands of dollars that Janet Mills did because main care wouldn't cover it or the housing or something
Yeah,
like
so
that.
that wasn't housing. There was an individual who didn't qualify for main care for whatever reason, who was here as an illegal immigrant. And this is one of the things that Steve Robinson had uncovered. Did a quick video on it where they found that from one of their I think it was from a Freedom of Information. Oh, maybe it was either a Freedom of Information Act request that they had done, or it was related to the no bid contract kind of thing
Yeah.
that they did. But it was about $800,000, just shy of $800,000 they spent of our tax dollars to do medical procedures for an illegal alien,
I thought I
somebody
read
who's
that
not
they housed
allowed to
him
be
and
here.
fed him and
Yeah.
all that stuff
Well, they
too.
probably did too. I mean,
Oh,
obviously, like all those other what else would they do? But like that's just a lot. Obviously, that's a lot of money for somebody. Like this is the problem with our society. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, and there are a group of churches that have not from necessarily around here. I think it's a national organization that they're trying to get people to sign a petition to go to the president to encourage him to resume the refugee program.
Catholic Charities.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with refugees in general, right? Like, let's say, like,
Right.
assuming America was in a place where we weren't where we currently are, right now, nationally, we have 5.5 million less dwelling units
Yeah.
than we need to house the people who are currently in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. America.
5.5 million housing units shy of what we need here in the state of Maine, somewhere in the 50 to 80,000 range. That
Yeah.
we are short in housing for our current existing population,
Right.
right?
Right.
So the analogy I use is like we currently we're like a family that has three kids of their own, has a 4-bedroom house, has 3 kids of their own, has adopted 3 additional kids, and somebody's coming to the door and saying, we need you to take somebody else in, and he's like, the only way I could take anybody else in is if I kicked one of my kids out. Right.
Right.
That's kind of the scenario that we're in here right now in the state of
Yeah.
Maine. We don't have the ability to house the current people that we have, which is one of the biggest things that drives up costs. This is basic economics, right? Is that when we have too much demand, not enough supply, that
Yeah.
causes the prices to inflate, to go
That's
above
right.
what they really should be. If the economy were acting naturally. And this also is a great example of what happens when the government gets involved in the process. The more the government gets involved, the more they screw up.
That's right.
I challenge people, like, give me an example of an area where the government is efficient. Like maybe in collecting taxes,
That
but not really, because they're not really terribly efficient there either.
I just
But
read
that's like,
that
yeah.
IRS employees they don't pay their taxes.
Yeah,
Did you
well,
see that?
who's going to audit them?
Right?
But
Come on, man.
it is pretty crazy.
It's so
But
crazy.
yeah, so they're incredibly inefficient. So having the government handle and manage anything else is a bad idea. And the more they get involved, the more they mess things up. In order to fix the fact that COVID-19 was happening, the government decided we had to shut down. In order to fix the problem that was created because we shut down, the economy was bad, they had to print money. And then there was inflation. In order to address inflation, they had to raise interest rates. All these things made things worse, and worse. And I don't necessarily disagree with needing to do something about, the inflation, but like the problem is the solutions that they keep enacting are worse than the problem. That the
Yeah.
more they get involved, the more it down spirals and gets worse. And unfortunately, the Democrats' response is always, well, we've got to do something new. And what's also part of the problem is that we as people want the government to do something. Even people who are Republicans are like, what's the government going to do to
Right.
fix this problem? And it's like, let's take education, right? And education is an issue that I am very passionate about. The problem in education is primarily not curriculum. It's not primarily the teachers. It's not how much money we're spending on education. It's primarily this one thing that is something that the government can't fix: parental engagement and involvement. If you look at
Yeah.
it statistically across the board, what leads to success of children? Parental engagement and involvement. It is the number one most significant factor in the success or failure of a child. Now, there are things that the education system can do by having a good curriculum and having a process where they seek to make sure that they do what they can do to engage parents. Absolutely, they can do stuff there. But if parents were just engaged on their own and really took seriously that this is their responsibility, and
Yeah.
it's almost like, the education system is a tool that they use to teach and train their children, and they have the
Right.
primary responsibility. Then either they would probably, in our current system, most of them would pull their kids out of school because they'd be like, oh, they're not doing a good enough job, I've got to find something else that where my kids can actually be educated appropriately. But that's a lot of the problems aren't actually problems that need to be fixed by the government. They need to be fixed by the people making
Yeah.
better decisions. And the more that the government gets involved, the more people are like, oh, I'm not going to deal with that because the government has to do it. In fact, I keep getting, so I worked in banking for 15 years, right? And people would constantly ask this question, or make this comment, I should say. We need the education system needs to teach, personal finance. And I'm like, no, parents need to teach their
Yeah.
kids, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to add another thing to the things that the education system needs to do that they're already failing at what they're currently doing. We need
Yeah.
parents to be involved. Guess what? If you want to be educated on finance, like, there are banks and financial institutions that would love to teach you. In fact, there are things like NerdWallet. This is not an ad for NerdWallet, but check it out. But there are things like NerdWallet that have all kinds of tools. SoFi is another digital bank, and they have all kinds of tools and like educational things on how to make a budget, how to build your credit. All these Credit Karma has this stuff. They're tools that are out there and easily available. People are just not using them. And anyway, education, personal engagement and involvement. We need to be more engaged. We need to do more. So anyway,
I think we've gotten in this position because for too long people have been okay with depending on somebody else to do it. I don't have to
yep,
do it. Somebody else is doing it. I elected somebody to go up there and do it. I don't need to do it. And in every aspect of our life, we've this is why we're here. So you're right. The people need to get more engaged in politics. And
yep,
to the people that say just leave me alone, I hate politics and I don't want to get involved. Sorry, cupcake. Everything, everything, every aspect of your life comes back to politics. The laws we follow, the funding for schools, everything revolves around politics, and people need to
yep,
be engaged. Now, as far as the parental involvement goes, the schools have made it almost impossible for parents to get
yeah.
engaged.
They
You
have.
know, and we need to take that back. We need to take
Yep.
that back. We pay for the building, the materials, the teachers, the everything. We pay for that. Just like the State House in Augusta, that's ours. We pay for that. We pay the people inside it to do, you know, to look out for us. And it's gotten so out of control. The government's like, hell, they haven't been watching. We can do whatever we want because people haven't been paying attention. The people
Yep.
need to stop paying attention, and
Yep.
that's my crusade right now. Is I'm just trying to get people to wake up, to find out the truth, at the actual truth, And I will never, ever manipulate anything to get views, to have people hear me. I'm not like that. I don't care what anybody says. I hate that. I hate manipulation. It's disgusting. It's a weak way of getting people to follow you or to listen to you or whatever, you know? If you need to manipulate people, then that's not cool in my book, you know? So whenever I try not to share fake
Yeah.
news or
Yep.
manipulated facts. You know, I trust and verify before I try to, post anything or say anything. I want it to be as much truth as I can possibly get because it's hard to get to people. You know what I mean? People will probably, if this goes on too long, people will be like, and they won't listen to it. You know, they need small windows. You have a small window to reach somebody. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Have them actually hear.
100%.
And their attention spans are just shit now. In social media and the phones, it's just I don't know. It's kind of out of control. Do you know what I mean? That
Yep.
you can get sucked into your phone for hours at a time, and you've got all these voices coming at you. Who the hell? You don't know who you're supposed to listen to. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So I will say though, and I can't remember the radio station, but lately I have they're trying to do a show called the Metro Show, and it's on a local radio station out of Rockland. And we did it once last month, where myself and then the new chair of the Knox County Democrats sits in, and we want to show that we can have a civil conversation about what's going on. And
Yep.
I'm really hoping that Knox can take the lead in the state, not only in the state, but in the country, because I don't see anybody else doing this. And show that we can get along. Nothing's going to get better until both sides can work together, because that's how our process was created. You know, we're not supposed to fight each other. We're supposed to come together, listen to each other's ideas, agree to disagree, and get the work done for the people. You know?
Absolutely. No, I think you make a really great point. We definitely do need to, I think it's one of the critiques, right, of for what's happened this year and many other years, but here in Maine. But like when you look at the budget, right? We talked about this, like the intention of the founders and the people who wrote the Constitution for the state of Maine was that they would pass a budget together. That 67%, 2/3, 66.666 or 67% of the legislature would be on board with whatever budget was passed, which probably requires, unless there's that much of a majority in one party or another, but this is something that's being done together, so that not just 50%, but a vast majority of the people of Maine, through their representatives, are in favor of said budget. That's the point. We need to be closer together, and even if it's things that I don't want to get passed, if it's more in line with what the average person in Maine wants, then that's how our government's supposed to work. I don't get my
Right.
way simply because I think I'm right. Like we have representative republic or constitutional republic, where we elect people who make those decisions for us. But that should reflect the general principles and values of the people that they're legislating. But yeah, so I think, but that requires, in almost all the time, not always, but almost always, that there would be bipartisan work here, and really, bipartisan. It should be bipartisan anyway,
Yeah.
right? Because the reality is, like, it's not okay. There's more than 60% of the population are Democrats, so we're going to pass all Democrat laws. To hell with all the Republicans who live with us. Like that's not, that doesn't seem right.
No,
Um,
and that's how it's been.
well, and I think if the Republicans were in power, they might do the same thing toward the Democrats, but less so from my experience. I think they tend to be a little bit more willing to work with people. But I live here in Maine, so what do I know? We've never had, outside of a few years under the LePage administration, how often have the Republicans actually been in power in my
Right.
lifetime?
Right.
Like less than 4 years, I think, in my entire lifetime, or 8 or whatever it was. But
And a lot of people forget that we left Massachusetts in 1820 because they went down this road. And
yeah,
the first governor of Maine was a Republican. We seceded from Mass because they were doing socialism like they are now. And I think if you took the woke socialist ideology out of it, we could get back to work. I think that's the whole reason
Yeah.
why it's gone off the rails. The transgender stuff, the last person to do that was Hitler. I mean, they tried to sew a womb into a guy in 1929 and he died. But before that, they tried to put breasts on him and everything else. These were experiments. And that's where that comes from.
Interesting.
And I'm not against, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. I don't care. You can identify whatever you want, but don't bring it into schools and don't push it on the children.
Well, don't push it on anybody. I mean, it goes back to this, like, I don't love, I think you were commenting earlier about like some of the crazy things that the Democrats were saying. And like, I think I understand where you're coming from, but you made the comment, like, the people shouldn't be allowed to say that. And it's like, it's a little scary, a little bit too close to like impingement on speech. But like people shouldn't say that. They should be legally allowed to say that, but they shouldn't say things that are intentionally say things that are not true. But in general, like we need to
sitting elected officials.
Right. Like there are laws about slander and things like that I think can be held, but anyway, I think that people, people should be better than that. We need people who are better than that. But people, if you want to live the life that you want to live, go ahead and live it. But you shouldn't be forcing. This is one of the biggest problems, and we've seen. I had on here a teacher. Oh gosh, why can't I remember her? Rebecca Brooks, who actually left her job when they passed the ACAA like anti-bullying adjustment that basically meant that if you don't use somebody's preferred pronoun, you're effectively bullying. If you're a girl and a boy walks into the bathroom and you say, "What are you doing in here?" you could get in trouble because maybe he identifies as a woman at the moment when he wants to get alone with a girl in a bathroom. Anyway, I'm obviously being a little facetious there, but like either way, like if you feel uncomfortable in that situation and you speak up about it, you can get in trouble. And so as soon as she recognized that, this teacher, as soon as they passed that, she immediately resigned because she's like, I'm not going to work in an environment that is limiting free speech. It's so important. So if you want to be trans, if you want to believe that you are whatever, we live in a free country. You can do that. Right. But what you can't do is force me to agree with you, just like I'm not going to force you to say Jesus is Lord. Now, one day I think he'll come back and he'll take care of that. But I'm not going to force you to agree with me about where ultimate truth lies. Right. I'm going to try to relay truth in any way that I can to anybody who will listen, and anybody who's interested, I'll talk more. But I'm not going to force my views and my beliefs on somebody else.
Right.
And that's the problem here. It's not that I'm like, you need to agree with me, you're a boy who thinks they're a girl, and you need to agree with me that you're actually a boy. I'm not saying that. I believe that, but I'm not going to force that on you. But I just don't think you have the right to force on me that if I don't agree with you, then I'm somehow a bigot and evil and wicked and all these other kinds of things.
And the other thing I don't get is in this crusade to give transgenders special rights, why do women and young girls have to lose their rights?
Right.
I mean, what is that? Yeah. And what is the end game for all this? Why is Janet Mills willing to die on this hill?
Well, I had this conversation a number of times at this point, but I enjoy it. It's fun for me. But there's a twofold problem here. One is ideological capture. I'm trying to stay on the camera. One is the ideological capture. The second issue is not being able to admit you're wrong. So in the ideologically captured side, part of the reason that this is such a big issue for the Democrat Party is because a significant portion of their base believes this lie. It believes that if you do not believe, if you take this girl, or this boy, I should say, who thinks he's a girl, and you don't affirm him in every way, then you are not affirming him at all.
Right.
And he might commit suicide and die.
What about the girl?
Like it doesn't matter because like you've got to protect him first because of this crazy false dichotomy where he's the biggest victim, so therefore we need to put him above everybody else, and everybody else needs to be at risk for the sake of the fact that, this person, it's just like what they do in the jails with this individual who I think has impregnated many women because
Yeah.
he identifies as a woman and keeps getting put in cells with other women and getting them
Yeah.
pregnant. I'm sure he's not raping them anyway.
Our girls
But
are
like,
being raped in our schools in unisex
yep,
bathrooms. The Maine Wire just
yep.
put an article out about it. It happened
Bonnie
last month,
Eagle,
March,
Bonnie
in
Eagle.
Bonnie
It was
Eagle. Yeah.
happened in Bonnie Eagle. Yep,
And it's
yep.
driving me crazy. It's all over the news. Boys are in girls' sports in Maine. Yeah, dude, they're in our bathrooms. They're everywhere.
That's
It's not just that. It's getting serious.
well, and there was another bill that was recently passed or recently went into effect that affects gyms in Maine, or it's about to be passed. I can't remember the exact details of it, but it's affecting gyms, right? And I saw a report that there was a woman who had posted somewhere here in Maine, but they posted online that their daughter was in a Planet Fitness,
Oh
no
yeah.
offense, Planet Fitness in Waterville, and a naked dude was
Mm,
was there. Her daughter
yeah.
is a teenager just trying to change after working out and has to see a naked dude. Um,
That's
that's the
sexual
thing
temptation to me.
sexual harassment is something. It's something,
Yeah.
and this is the part. So I know we've talked a lot here in our state about, you know, like the sport element, but the spaces, like
Yeah.
sports. Like, look, I think girls should have a place where they can compete. They can't compete against boys. That's why we have to have a separate class. But whether or
We're
not you win
using
the
our
trophy
pageant,
or
our beauty
whether
pageant.
whether you win the trophy or not, I'm not as concerned with as if you have to change in front of a boy at age
Yeah.
13. That
Yeah.
that's a bigger problem to me. It's not getting as much press because it doesn't, we don't have pictures of that, unlike we did with the trans athlete, where
Yeah.
we could be like,
Right.
here he is as a boy, here he
Yeah.
is
I
as a
mean,
girl,
like, these girls will get
and
raped in
but like,
unisex bathrooms.
I mean, and this is the thing. I bring this up a couple of times, at least on this podcast, I think at this point. But like the thing that like I'm not like, not all boys are rapists, but teenage boys have hormones that they've never had before, and they don't know how to control them. I was there. I didn't rape anybody or anything like that.
Mm.
But like the point is that there's a higher temptation and a higher risk, and so many of these kids don't even. Well, I mean, in this situation, it would be actual, but like, you just don't want to create an opportunity for people who are so driven by sexual hormones, and especially in this digital world where people are also very twisted by what they find in social media and just on the internet in general. And like,
Yeah.
there's like, kids today are much more dangerous, I think, in this way than they were when I was in high school, where we
Yeah.
barely had access to pornography, for instance. But now, I remember one of the things that kind of relates to this conversation is there's this episode. I don't remember watching it, but I heard people cite it, of Friends, where Joey and Chandler apparently had gotten free porn or whatever, and so they were just watching porn all the time. And then one of them went to the bank and like came back, and he's like, "There was something so weird happened. I went to the bank and the girl didn't want to sleep with me," right? And it was like that, watching so much pornography, seeing that, it actually twists your brain to you think that this insane stuff that happens in here is normative. And so you've
Yeah.
got these kids that are obviously, look, teenagers, sorry parents, hopefully you can find some ways to mitigate this, but most of these kids have easy access to pornography because the internet
Yeah.
is
A lot of them don't have
so
parents that are paying attention either.
exactly. And so they're watching that stuff, they're being twisted by it, they're having false expectations. And so I'm not saying any of this is okay, right? But like, some of this will lead some of these kids to go and think that it's okay to follow a girl into a bathroom
Yeah.
and just convince her to have sex with him and actually end up raping her.
Yeah.
And again, if you think somebody who would do that wouldn't pretend to be the opposite gender to do it, then your brain is
Yeah.
in a different part of your body.
Yeah. The guardrails
Right?
are off.
Like,
There's no
like,
guardrails anymore.
right.
It's
And
just a
that's
free
just
for all.
dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I can find a law firm that will do it, I want to sue the Mills administration as a woman for this discrimination and for those poor girls that are being raped in the bathrooms with no protection. You
Well,
know?
and here's the thing: if anybody's listening, that part of the problem is like when you go to sue somebody, you have to. There, I don't know the exact terminology, but you
Right.
have to. I think what I think the term is like you have to have standing, so which means you have to be an aggrieved party. I believe. Again,
Yeah, I
I'm
am
not the lawyer,
totally.
so but but were you specifically impacted by that? Just being a woman isn't good enough. You have to have been a woman that had your rights impacted as a result of this. So one of
Well,
these
I'll find
girls,
one
for
because there's
instance,
plenty
one
of
of
them
these
there, right?
that's what I'm saying. One of these girls who's been raped, or
Yeah,
one of these girls who's had trophies taken away from them,
yeah,
had to change in front of boys and things like that. If one of these girls will make the decision with the help of their parents and not pressure them into it, but we need to fix our country, and we need to fix our
yeah.
country, and one of the best ways to do that is with legal action.
That's right.
Once you take one of these things to court and we win, people are going to back off. They're going
Yeah,
to have to, right?
yeah.
Because because the legal system, is the literally the law of the land, and it becomes serious. So that's what we need. If you're a girl out there and anything's happened to you, I'm sorry, but if it's horrible enough what has happened to you, but one of the things we need to ensure it doesn't happen to more people is we need people to come forward and
That's
share their
right.
stories and take them to court. Unfortunately, it's yeah,
That's
it's
what we're gonna
sad
have
that our
to
world
do.
is in this crazy state.
Yeah,
But yeah, so you're the chair of Knox,
yeah.
of the Knox County Republicans, and what are you guys doing to fight back, and try to help, make Maine red? Is what we, Republicans see. We got all the red here today
Yeah,
with all the
I know.
with all
I'm
the
surprised I'm
merch.
not the way I am. But I figured I'd go neutral today. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
enough of
that's all right. Yep.
that. So my plan is to get Republicans or common sense people in office, from the dog catcher to the district attorney. Um, in school
Nice.
boards, in selectmen seats, city, council seats. The common sense has left. We need common sense back. As you can see, almost every group in society is being hurt by one thing or another. Whether you're a woman or even the men are getting a bad name because of what's going on. I mean, it's ridiculous. The legal immigrants are getting, they're living in fear now, thinking they're getting deported when it's only illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
Um, I just want, I want to bring common sense back. I want to, obviously the most important thing is to get Republicans in, being the chair of the local Republican Party. But the second most important thing is to bring the community together, learn how to heal through civil conversation, um, and just settle down and learn to talk to each other. Be neighborly once again. We're scared. Neighbors are scared of each other now. When we used to be able to go get a stick of butter and some eggs off each other, we used to be able to depend on each other in times of need, and we're not doing that now. We're not even waving good morning or anything. It's become this antisocial, stay on your phone type of thing. Um, I want to bring common sense and love back to the community, and see where we can go from there. But the
Yeah.
people need to get out and vote with their brains, not their feelings. A lot of people have been voting with their feelings on both sides. Um, and that's not how we should vote. We should be voting with our brains, with looking at the policy, digging into research, digging into who you're voting for and why. Is what they're saying true? Is it false? Where's their funding coming from? Clean up the political atmosphere a little bit, and bring common sense back into the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's interesting is I'll share like a story again, going back to that woman that I met with from the Shelley Pingree rally, and we were talking about. I brought up, because even though we divide on a number of things, I think she's okay with the level of taxes that we have, and again has a different view and understanding of how they impact businesses and how they're harming, I think, our economy. And I think wonders where I get my statistics from, and I wonder where she gets hers from, right?
Right.
But what we could agree on is that there are some problems with these, like this oligopoly is what I would call it. We've got this
Yeah.
group of like really large major corporations. And as far as I'm concerned, if the government wants to regulate the crap out of them, I don't care. If other Republicans have a problem with that and are upset with me, I also don't care. The problem that we have in our society is that we overregulate the small businesses. It makes
Yeah.
it so that they can't compete with big businesses.
Right.
So I think the big
Walmart's a
businesses are
good
sitting
example
there,
of that.
a great example. They have some, and they also negotiate good real estate prices just for fun. I heard this story about Walmart. So they basically, instead of being taxed on the value of the property as it's being used by them, they've negotiated to only be taxed on the value of the property if they weren't there. Which would be a lot less, because
Yeah.
it's like, how
How
in
can
the
they do
world?
that?
I don't really know. Also not an expert. I've heard
Yeah.
that through the grapevine. So feel free to fact check me and let me know that I'm wrong, if I'm wrong. But yeah, you get major corporations that have more power and are able to get away with things, but they also they publicly will make it look like they're against regulation, but privately they're like, ha ha ha, it's going to help us beat the little guy,
Yeah,
because they can handle the regulation, and it might negatively impact their business in one sense, but because it will help them gain a larger market share, it actually positively impacts their business in the long run. And so,
right.
so anyway, so we need to like not regulate these smaller businesses, and that's actually something that she agreed with. So there is common ground that we can find, and that's the overall point. She really cares about small businesses. She cares about the middle class.
Yeah.
Here in America and in Maine, and I think that's where like this 1% tax that they put on this last year, that was one that I brought up, and I was like,
Yeah.
the bigger issue than the 1% tax actually with this particular situation is that it harms small businesses that can only afford to hire 5 people. Because if
Yeah.
you have 5 people working for you and one of those people goes out on FMLA, or 2 of those people go out on FMLA, you're going to have to close up shop.
Yeah.
You can't, because you can't, for a lot of these things where they're highly technical or they need somebody to be really educated, they can't hire new people because they they need 5 people. They can't
I
hire,
worked
because
at a place like that.
and
My work is like that.
if one or 2 people ended up going out on FMLA, well, they have to replace that person. But then when that person comes back from FMLA, family medical leave,
Yeah.
when that person comes back, now you've got both people, and you have to protect the position of the person that left with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now you either have to fire the person that you hired to fix them. But anyway, it's just this. So the problem is it makes the staffing situation much more complex and much more difficult for businesses that are already struggling to get appropriate amounts of staffing and get the
Yeah.
right people and get them trained the way that they need to be trained. And so, and I was kind of bringing this up, and she's like, no, yeah, that makes so much sense. And so there is middle ground. There are people out there that, and she, I'll use this comment. She votes 90%, she said, with the Democrats. And so, she's, when she votes, that's usually, she doesn't vote 100% for Democrats. So she's not your, kind of drinking all the Kool-Aid
Yeah.
Democrat, but she's largely on
No
board.
matter
But
who.
right. She largely agrees with the issue of needing to support these small businesses and recognizing that
Great.
some of these regulations are actually harmful. And so we need to get out there. We need to continue to have civil discourse, as you said, because by having that civil discourse, we can, especially if we do our homework, we got to do that. We got to do our homework,
Yeah.
and make sure that we know what's actually going on, and we can have these conversations. Because if I didn't know anything about what's going on in our state and I didn't have things to point to, she's not going to listen to me after that. But like,
Right.
maybe we can get somewhere if we continue to have discourse, and we'll probably find other areas where we disagree, and maybe we can hopefully work through those things on a path to truth. And I think one of the other things that I'll say is, I had Jim Libby was on here. He's Senator
Yeah.
Jim Libby, and he was making a comment that there are some Democrat ideas that are good ideas, right?
Mhm.
And I know
Yeah.
that sometimes in the Republican Party we don't want to admit that the Democrats have ever done anything right.
All
But the truth is that there are ideas that they have that are actually good ideas, right? And
Yeah.
so by having this siloed world that we have, these echo chambers where we
Yeah.
as Republicans only talk to other Republicans and the Democrats only talk to other Democrats, we're both missing out. And that's one of the reasons we need to engage in civil discourse.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I don't want to be just another voice in that friggin' echo chamber. I don't want that. I want people to remember that we are all Americans before we belong to any friggin' political party. We are
yeah,
Americans first. And we've
yeah,
got to start working together to save our country.
yeah,
Our states are all part of this nation. We don't stand alone. And I think they're trying to get Maine to stand alone, which means we'll be alone. We won't get the help that we want. And
yeah,
part of that help's already being cut off
yeah,
because Mills is trying to take it into uncharted waters without a
yeah,
map or anything.
yeah,
She's willing to leave us, and I'm sorry, but a mutiny needs to happen. The crew members need to stand up and say, "Hey, I don't like where this captain's taking this shit. We're not going to survive this." And
yeah,
I'm just waiting for them to do that.
yeah,
And it's well, I don't hate anybody. What I hate is the hate it's created
yeah,
amongst us. You know,
yeah,
I know I'm a big critic of the other side, um, but at the end of the day, we're all Americans, and that's how I try to see everybody. Unless you are in a sitting official that declared either a D or an R, I'm going to call you out. You know, I try not to do the Democrats as a whole, and I get caught up in it because I ain't a professional at this. I just started at this, and I'm not a genius. I don't know everything. I'm just simply sick of what's going on, and I'm taking a stand and speaking up for the people who aren't brave enough to do it or don't have the time to do it. It's I just want to help. That's all I'm trying to do. I
yeah,
don't want to be a threat to anybody. I just want to help my neighbors and my family be prosperous, happy, and healthy.
yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Sounds pretty great to me. So
Yeah.
how can people help? How can people get involved? How can the people at home help us win this battle and help fix our state and our country?
They can get involved. They can start getting involved in the conversation. I know the biggest problem is not a lot of the people are online. They don't
Mhm.
have social media. And I've got to find a way to reach them. Um, but like I've been saying, the only way I know how is to go join your local GOP. And if you don't like how it's being run, get in there, join it, and take up that space that you're not happy with, and be the change that you want to see. You know, and get out in your community, talk to your neighbors, help, be helpful. Be part of it. I know there's a lot of people that are barely getting by right now, and the only thing that they can do is work, and that's the position that the middle class has been put in, and most of my audience is middle class. I'm middle class, but we've got to make sacrifices in order to win the victory. You can't have victory without sacrifice, um, and we can't lose this. I don't want another 4 years of this dictatorship, and that's exactly what it is. It's one party rule, and it's soon to become a police state. And there are some Republicans in Augusta that are helping with that. Brad Barron, uh, wanting to put cameras out and give us speed tickets on camera. That's a police state.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm not a fan of that for sure.
and a lot of people don't know that if they don't have social media because the media, the newspapers, the Channel 6s and the Channel 13s of Maine aren't telling them that.
Yeah.
So,
But that's the thing about this. The main, like, this is where, like, if media exists here in the state of Maine, and it doesn't like spend a substantial portion of its time talking about politics, I don't know why they exist.
yeah,
Like I don't
what's the
under, I don't,
agenda?
I really don't understand, and they really don't do a lot we need to do a better job building a much more robust apparatus, like kind of sharing information about politics, politicians, and
Yeah.
policies. We're on in the digital world. We're getting better. Pine Tree Patriots is doing some really cool things. Big
Yeah.
shout out to Jeremy,
Yeah.
who's leading that. And there are some other things that are happening. Obviously, Maine policy and is doing some good things, but we really don't yet, I think, have a really robust digital like tool that would help
The
people
main
better
wire has been
understand what's
great.
going on. The Maine Wire is incredible. They do a lot, and they like that's actually where like most of the news that I'm interested in. Not just because I like conservative news, but they actually report on stuff that I follow like WGME and other things here on
It
on
blocked
on
me.
on X, and they haven't blocked me yet. I do sometimes make fun of them and be like, "Oh, you guys did so close. You almost were journalists there. You
Yeah.
recognize that there's a problem, but you didn't tell us what what caused the problem, which is obviously Democrat policies. Oh, all these businesses in Portland are closing down. It's like,
Yeah.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh. Yep. What do you think the reason is, guys? Come on, just one more step. Maybe we'll
Right.
get there. They're so close to journalism. But there's really not a lot going on. And by the time they've reported on it, the Main Wire has already reported on it anyway.
Yeah, they keep
And so
stealing stories from them and then taking credit. It's
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah. But
I
leaving
got
out
big
and
shout out
leaving
to
out,
Steve Robinson. He's been huge. He's been
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, well, I
So
remember too, and I give Steve Robinson a lot of credit because I remember looking at, when I first was running for office in early 2022. Somebody was like, "Oh," I was like, "There really," or even before that, I was like, "There really isn't any like Maine conservative news in Maine."
no.
Somebody's like, "Well, there is the Main Wire," and I was like, "Really?" So I looked it up, and I was like, "Ugh." And this was like, again, it was probably either late 2021 or early 2022. Steve Robinson, I guess, came in sometime in 2022 back to I'm told the Main Wire, and since then it has been rocking and rolling. So
Well,
he's done a great job.
he helped create the main wire and get it off the ground. He left Maine
Okay.
during COVID and then saw the need for a real news outlet here and came back
Yeah.
and helped create it, which I'm so thankful for because we
Yeah.
wouldn't know anything if it weren't for them. And that's where I go for my source, not
Yeah.
because they're not conservative. They don't take sides at all.
Well,
And
I
they
think they call themselves a conservative news source, so I think they are conservative, not Republican. I think a lot of them are libertarians, but I think they do call themselves a conservative news source. But I do think that they are fair, more. I don't think they're like saying that they're conservative doesn't mean that they're necessarily terribly biased, and I think that's more what you're
right,
saying. I think they come across as being very unbiased and focusing on the facts of
right,
what's actually happening rather than like, I mean, they're appropriately critical of the Republican Party, the way that they
yeah,
criticized a couple of things that I think that were very appropriate to criticize. One was the Rays giving the Rays without a fight to
yeah,
Shenna Bellows,
yeah.
as well as the how before this individual was a gubernatorial candidate officially, there was an opportunity to have Bobby Charles as the AG for
Yeah,
Maine,
yeah.
and for what reason I think I know, and I just don't care for. So sorry if you guys are on the other side of this, but the reason that the Maine legislature chose not to put him forth as their candidate, and so again, the Maine Wire criticized the Republicans for
Yeah.
Aaron Fry being our current AG.
Yeah, but I don't how would the Republicans even have a say in that we're
So
outnumbered?
basically each party gets to nominate somebody, and you can nominate somebody else, but like basically each party will, or there are nominations that are taken, right? And so the
Yeah.
party basically worked together and said, we're going to nominate one person, and so they nominated somebody else, and then there's a vote. Now here's the story
Oh,
with this situation. Bobby had gone around to a whole bunch of the Democrats, and basically he believed that he had enough votes, enough Democrats were willing to vote for him because again, he's a good guy, and he's got, I mean, look at the credentials this guy has.
yeah.
He's better credentials to but anyway, he like in terms of legal credentials, I'm not going to get into better than this or that, but he
Right.
just has incredible, credentials in the legal field, and I think so I think a lot of people were swayed by that or by his personality because he's a fair guy, he's good at building relationships, and so I think anyway, so I think a bunch of the Democrats were at least saying that they were willing to vote for him.
Huh.
Now, when push comes to shove, we know how Democrats vote. So would they have? Probably not.
Right.
Or I'm very skeptical that they would have, but there was at least a chance. Over on this hand, zero chance that our candidate is going to get elected. On this hand, there might be a chance. And it also from a credential standpoint, this would be the best candidate that we've ever put forward. And so, in my opinion, if the Democrats who had claimed that they were going to support him chose not to, that's something we could use against them. In my opinion, others
Yeah.
disagree with me, but in my opinion, that's something we could use against them in 2026. But instead, I think part of what happened was some poor communication internally within the party, and then the main GOP chair from the main GOP ended up endorsing without communicating with the House and the Senate.
Wow.
GOP endorsed Bobby, and I think that caused there to be bad blood and silly things like that. Things that shouldn't impact politics, but do. We're broken
Yeah.
people, and I think people are like, I don't want somebody else telling me what to do. You know how the
Yeah.
Republican Party where it's herding cats, right? Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and so like you tell them what to do. They're like, no, we're definitely not doing that. Thank you for helping me decide what not to do.
Yeah.
But it's really unfortunate. But either way, that's kind of what happened in that
Yeah.
situation,
I
or what it
mean,
looks
here
like
I
happened from where I sit. I'm
right.
playing armchair quarterback here, so to speak. But
Right. We've got a lot of healing to do within our party.
yeah,
We've got to be able to come together and work together as a machine. If we're going to win anything, so I mean,
well,
we we
we
need to
we
work
got to
on
work.
that.
We have to work together and we have to be okay.
Yeah.
Like this is part of the problem. We have to be okay with people who aren't 100% how we want them to be. Right?
Right.
We are the big tent party, right? Like the Trump, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon
Yeah.
Musk, like
Right.
Vivek, Nicole Shanahan. We are the big tent party. We're not. Everybody doesn't have to be uniform. It's actually one of the
Right.
great things about the Republican Party is that we're the party of diversity of thought. We don't have to agree on everything, and we don't have to agree with all the decisions that everybody else does. And so, like,
Right.
okay, I have these critiques of the main GOP, the combination of the workings of the main GOP and the main House and the main Senate, main Senate Republicans, main House Republicans. But guess what? I'm still going to support them because like they're doing great. They're on my team and they're doing largely the right things. And the critiques that I have of them are far less than the critiques that I have of the insane policies of the radical left. There are so many
Yeah.
people that have these what do you want to call it, purity tests that they want to do and be like, oh, this person doesn't 100% agree on that, so we're going to go against them. And it's like, I mean, feel free, but I just think that's a huge waste of time and it's not
It
really
is.
helpful. Why don't we win? And then if you want to go down that road, feel free. But like right
Right.
now, it's like you might be tearing down people that are our only hope at actually being able to win a
Yes.
majority without even really knowing all the facts. We
Yeah.
really need to stop attacking our own at this
I've
point.
seen that a lot of
Um,
that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
actually
So
shocked me.
yeah, I've spoken out a
Well,
little bit. Not everybody loves it when I do, but we really need to stop attacking our own because
yeah.
the enemy that we're fighting against is one like I call it the radical left. Again, I'm not talking about your average everyday Democrats. I think that
Right.
largely great people want to see the world a better place, have a different idea as to how to get
Right.
there and exactly where that is. And I have a lot of compassion with them. But when you talk about the policies of the radical left and the agenda of the radical left, which we talk about the transgender treatment of minors and things like that. This is a money making machine of the pharmaceutical industrial complex.
Yeah.
Like these really big people, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, big food, big
Right.
food that is in bed with big drugs that want to keep us unhealthy and
Yeah.
profit off of us along the way, right?
Yep.
These people don't care about us and are trying, and their whole objective and then you get like big tech and all these other things that really just want to take away our freedom. They want us to be slaves of the state. This agenda that is being pushed forth by them is radical and motivated and coordinated, and it's too dangerous for us to be worried about these minute
Yeah.
things that
And the
this
minor
person
things
didn't
they're
show up to this
distracting.
event that I wanted them to show up to, or this person didn't, like even the critiques that you have, and I agree with you, of like the police state and the, get digital tickets. That's a problem for sure.
Yeah.
But when you compare that to like every other thing that the Democrats are
Yeah.
doing, it's like, I'm disappointed in that representative, but I don't think they're I don't think they're the enemy.
Yeah, no.
On that one issue. They are right, and we need to hold them accountable. But like,
Right.
and that's where, like, again, what I also would say is, like, I'm not saying that we can't hold people accountable and we shouldn't call people out when they do things that are wrong. But there's a difference between saying, "Hey, I think this is wrong and I disagree with you, and this is why," and saying we need to get rid of this person, right? And the
Yeah.
tone with a lot of people is basically like, I'm writing that person off. They're done. They're now the enemy, and it's like we really need to work together, because if we don't work
Yeah.
together, doesn't matter how right we are, we could lose. So anyway,
Yep. You're
I went
right.
off on a rant today.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much
Glad
for
to
coming
go.
on, and thanks for stepping up. I mean, again, it takes a lot of guts to step up and run as a Republican, especially for a seat that.
My studio's falling apart over here.
Uh, That's all right. But it takes a lot to run for office and then step up. I think it's hard to run for office. I think it's even harder to be chair of a party, even a county of a party. So thank you
Yeah.
for stepping up and working there, and trying to get Republicans elected, not because you're just in love with the Republican Party and everything that we
Oh,
do, but because we need a better world.
yeah.
And right now, what the radical left is doing is dangerous, and we need to push back against it. So thank you
Yep.
for stepping up and being willing to come on and speak to the world, or
No
whoever from the
problem.
world watches this. So
It's all a first for me. Like I said, I'm a recovered drug addict and stuff, so this is all new to me, but I love it. It's a better road, better path. But I've never been chair of anything and any of that, so I'm still a work in progress. But I'm just
yeah,
gonna do the best that I can for us, not for me, for us. So
awesome,
thank you, Chuck.
awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, hang out for just a bit, real quick. So everyone else, again, thank you all for watching. Remember, your job at home. One of the things that you can do is there will be shorts of this. I don't expect everybody to watch these, hour long or hour and a half long episodes, but there is information that's presented in here that I think is useful for people out there to see. And so there will be shorts from these. And your job and your responsibility is share the data, share the information, share the clips, like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and buy merch to help support us, because we don't make money, but we hope to lose less if you buy some of this stuff. But it also gives you an opportunity to have conversations with people, and so we will have a website coming soon for the Muddy Waters podcast. But in the meantime, check us out on X, where again, our link is it's over at Printly, where you can buy stuff. So again, thank you all, and keep up the good fight. And we'll see you back here on Monday, where we have the aforementioned. We actually didn't mention his name necessarily, or maybe I did, but we have Bobby Charles will be joining on Monday. Not sure exactly what we're talking about. Probably his upcoming gubernatorial race, where he's now a declared candidate. So we'll see you back here Monday. Thanks.